Hey, everybody, welcome back to magick.tv. I'm your host, Rob Rubin, Philippine Tower Authority and founder of Mysterium Philippines. And quite unfortunately, my better half, my dearest friend, Wade, will not be able to join us tonight. He had some medical things he needed to look into, but tonight's episode comes from something that's close to my heart, which is a nice incorporation of two practices that personally mean a lot to me. One, of course, is the practice of magic, but the other is the practice of martial arts. Now, I don't claim to be this badass martial artist. I'm not a black belt, but martial arts has always had a big part in my life. I'm a proud blue belt, humble but proud blue belt of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I'm actually a growing mixed martial artist. But one thing I've always put together was that the discipline that you learn from genuine martial arts and traditional martial arts are things that could make you not only a better person, a better fighter, but an even better human being to yourself and to the people around you. And this truth goes hand in hand with the practice of magic and the occult. So without further ado, I am really honored to welcome our guest of honor, the occult forums legend, if you guys know what I'm talking about, none other than Frater Ashen Chassan. Hello, Frater. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Honor's all mine. So, Frater, I've been fanboying you since the occult forums. And for you people out there used to be a place where we occultists used to converge called occult forums. And Frater Ashen Chassan was one of the few people who gave good content there. Now with the things of Facebook and stuff out there, so you can find him on groups and stuff. But some of the content he gave was very amazing, if not most of it. So what I've always liked is about the almost impeccability of your practice. You take it really seriously. You don't cut corners. From your tools to your robes to your beliefs to your practices, all of it's hand in hand. And I wanted to ask you, how did you get started in all of this?
Well, the classic ceremonial magic began, I'm going to say the early 2000s, if not 2000 itself. And it came about, the lead up to it was actually quite a long story, but it was due to having several encounters, spiritual encounters, and haunting phenomenon, things growing up in my family, and I was trying to deal with some of the happenings that were going on, figure out what was happening, try to get a handle on it better, because I didn't receive a lot of good answers from, I guess, the authorities that I went to and such. But I started looking into magic as a teenager, and some of the sources that I came upon dealt with ceremonial magic, modern magic, and some other ones that had kind of, I guess, some newer ideas. But eventually I did get into the grimoires themselves, and I became fascinated with them and really wondered if I could make them work. I had tried a few experiments from various books of magic as a teen and in my early 20s, and I found I was able to get some things happening. I got results from it. So it spurned on from there, and then dealing with spirits, which is definitely the subject matter of most grimoires, most Solomonic grimoires, and really recognizing the kind of framework that they have. It was unfamiliar to me. I grew up with kind of a loose Protestant background from my family, so I didn't have much background in Catholicism. But learning, kind of having to go back, I'd stepped away from Christianity quite a bit, but having to go back and read or kind of get a new appreciation for early Catholic liturgy and maybe some deeper meanings behind the power, the symbology of what it could mean. I began doing a lot of research and then experimentation, trying to formulate these practices. And I did have a few associates. Like I said, there's some loose online, forums of people that were interested in that. But I did recognize that just about everybody still did heavily modified forms of what these grimoires were speaking about and what they were instructing the practitioner. And I was really interested in seeing if I could replicate the actual experiments as the grimoire dictated, and start from there rather than assuming anything, because I was definitely brand new at the whole thing. And I just really went into it with the mindset of not assuming whether it be tool or one of the invocations or the preparations or the purifications, but just to take all of it to be able to experience it and figure out how it might work into a magical practice, and then how it worked for the results. And that's how I went about being into this work.
Now, Frater, if you don't mind me asking, what were your initial inspirations, or let's say, what was your starting point? Did you do Golden Dawn? Were you into the Gozetia? Were you into like the Heptameron? What was like your first foray into it?
I think, like many, it really was the Gozetia, the Lamegata. I came upon the seals and the sigils, like so many. I was fascinated to read up. It was Crowley's version. I had one of the early versions, of it. And I actually started out with a little pamphlet, and it was very fascinated about, these spirits and what they could do, and what their exact nature. And even myself, with the information that I had, I was so excited. I did some very heavily modified versions of what I thought would be a way to contact these spirits. And even with the heavily modified version, I got some really interesting occurrence, kind of a facade, a face appeared in some rising smoke, and, I could see it moving around. I couldn't hear anything, and I didn't really ask the spirit to do anything at that point. I was just excited to see if it could work. And then the more research I did, I got into Golden Dawn, I think afterwards, because a lot of the books at that time, the modern magic and lodge style magic was heavily just kind of interwoven with the aspects of the Lamegatan and Goetia at that time. So I started learning, the basic rituals. I eventually went through the self-initiation, but the invoking and banishing rituals, the pentagram, and opening by a watchtower, middle pillar, all of these things, heavily involved in and practice very religiously on a daily basis. And it really set a lot of, I think, foundational work for me that was very good in my development in ritual magic later on, even though I wouldn't use it as often when I started getting more into the classic work. I still think it's excellent. I still use it sometimes separately from the classical work, but the Golden Dawn really has a lot of excellent structure that I still utilize. But I kind of learned them at the same time, and then when I started with the more classical work, that became my purpose, and trying to develop more of, I guess, a liturgical foundation for my magical practice, as it was done in the grimoires.
Okay, because like another thing I wanted to say is, like I said, the impeccability of the tools. Even way before Instagram was out, you were taking some really good photos of your consecrated tools, your sword, your ropes. I mean, like, when I was just this schmuck living in the province here in the Philippines, I drool over your stuff. I'm like, this badass. And if I'm not mistaken, you were the guy on the code said, don't ask me to be your teacher, because anybody who asked me couldn't keep up. Was that you on the occult forums? So, because I think that was because, like, you really had the epicness of the tools and everything. Did you start off really being that intricate in the creation of the magical tools, or was that something that you just built up to, that you said, like, you know what, the more I do this, the more intricate I want my tools to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was a process. Like I told people, I didn't have any legitimate training. Like, I took shop class when I was in junior high school. That's as far as it went. But I always liked making things, and I mean, I took various art classes through high school and college. So I might have had a kind of a knack for them, but I think it was just kind of an obsession when I started getting into things. And, I'd ask for an ebony wand, an ebony pedestal, and these things were not available. You couldn't buy them anywhere, even if I wanted to. I might have skipped over that and just, jumped on Etsy, but Etsy didn't really exist back then.
There was no Etsy back then. Actually, it brings me to the question I'd like to ask you on a practical level. Some occultists said that, especially when working with the Goetia and the Lamegatan and things like that, like, if you were to engrave the seals of the spirits on their corresponding metal, they would be even more powerful than if you did it on like a piece of paper or another kind of metal. Did you adhere to this, or were you like the very Lon Milo Duquette approach? Like if you can do it on a piece of paper, go ahead as long as you're doing it. What was your approach? Like if you're going to do it perfectly, or perfect is the enemy of done? Which was the approach you chose?
Yeah, so like I was saying, like I started with heavily modified forms when I first started. I wrote it down on a piece of blotter paper, parchment paper, or something like that. The sigils, because I was like, oh, at first I wanted to see if I could get any kind of reaction at all, if there's anything behind this. And then it was just a progression where I was like, there's something here. And, the Grimoire says to make it on these types of metals. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, follow what the Grimoire says, because there might be something that, I still tell people to this day that, I mean, yes, you can get magic to work in various things, and the whole process isn't contained in the materials. But it is an assimilation. Sometimes I call it compounding of correspondences. The more that you can get something in agreement with the spirit, it's the nature of the day, the powers that are behind it, planetary powers, if you will. Western magic is built on correspondences. I mean, that's the technology that's behind
Very
it.
true.
So to not acknowledge it, or you like, why would you do that type of magic is always my question. And sometimes in exchange, and even different grimoires have different, point to different objects. It could be argued, but for my practice, I'm glad that I went that way. I was just, really dedicated to seeing if I did it the way that it instructed, what could I accomplish? And I have several people come to, would it be just as good if I did it this way, or if I didn't use this or didn't this way? And I tell them honestly, I didn't do it that way. My object and magic was not to see what I could get away with, or if it's just as strong, or if it's just as this, but what are my results if I'm following, what the grimoires and these correspondences are saying. And in my practice, I don't have that much time to mix and match and stuff, all the different ways. So I can't say that to which degree this is better than that, or how much stronger this is that rather than that. I just know what I've done and what the results have been. And, so far, the many decades later, glad that, I've been giving fidelity, I guess, not just to the grimoires and such, but I guess to the acknowledgement of the technology that's behind it.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, besides the base materials, I think it's the mindset and the focus that I have about the seriousness behind what I'm doing. It's, the interactions with the spirits and the things that I've encountered. I'm glad I didn't do it for 5 minutes, just writing it down on a piece of notebook paper. I don't think it has the same quality and seriousness of the interactions that I've had with these beings. I don't think those things could be, shared that way, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. That just shows how much respect you show for the practice. And I think that if occultists around the world showed that kind of practice, or that reverence to the practice, like, I'm going to take it seriously, I'm going to go the extra mile, then I think occultism would be in a more better light than it is now. But we'll talk about that later. Now, the next thing I wanted to ask you is, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your first book was Gateways Through Stone and Circle. Am I correct, sir? And
yes, that was my first published work.
Yeah, what was your original inspiration of making that your first work? Because I have that book, but the one that's next to me, next to my bed, is through Gateways Through Lights and Shadow. I mean, quite frankly, they're worlds apart. I mean, this one I got right here. It's like, this is what I was expecting you to write first. So I'm curious as to why Stones and Circle came first and not this.
It was a progression, and it went forward in a timeline. So my first book came about. I'd never considered being a writer or an author, and it actually came about being within a group of many of the online mages from the forums, the previous forums, were involved in a group called the Gentlemen of Jupiter, and I actually learned about the art of drawing spirits and the art of drawing spirits into crystals through Frater Rufus Opus.
Yeah.
And it was he Aaron Leach and some of the other ones were like, because we were dealing with planetary beings and angels. And he had practiced it before me and kind of did this modified version of it. And he shared that with the group. And it was all about, let's try to practice this. Let's see what we can accomplish. Okay. And I read up, I was like, wow, I would love to do this exactly as it's written in the Magus. It's not that complex. And as far as especially the invocations and such goes, it's probably the easiest, the most simplified version I've ever seen as far as Solomonic magic goes. There's just a few tricky, like an ebony pedestal surrounded by a gold disc with the crystal in the center, this type of thing. But I was like, I'm not gonna modify. I'm not gonna cut in the corners. I'm gonna try to do it as close as I can.
Old school, like the old school.
And that's like the old school. And basically the first book is basically update version of notes that I was recording about. This is how I made this. This is how I appreciated the art, and that I started to practice. And it just started out as notes for my fellow magicians to share what I was doing, the work that I was doing. But one of the members who is an author, he's like, "This is fantastic. You get this." I was like, "Well, I'm not a writer," and he's like, "Yes, you are." He's like, "You need to do this."
I kind of agree. You are a good writer. You are, for an occultist, you are a good writer. Please accept it, because I've read people who know what they're talking about, but you can't digest it. It just doesn't want to go down. Your stuff is like, wow, it's right there. It's clear. So please continue. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, it was exciting. So that's what I did. And it really is just kind of a manual of, this is how I understand the art. This is how I made the tools. This is how I do the practice from what is written in the grimoire. And there's, some parts of where, I put in my own inspiration, like, the ultra stars and other things that aren't mentioned to make the practice work for me. And it was just basically it is a record of how I practice the art of drawing spirits into crystals. And I kind of shared, I was going to share more, but by the time it was ready to be published, material forward, and I had just made contact a couple times with each of the planetary angels. And I could see them and, could hear them, but it was still my scrying and developing and taking the notes afterwards. It was still very much in a young stage, and difficult for me to absorb myself within the scrying process and experience the angels, and then come back and then try to remember everything and write it down. But it was working amazingly. And it wasn't till, I believe, at least a couple of years later that with my friend Ben, who became my scryer, and our adventure really began, I would say, by accident. It was intended. It was accident for us, perhaps because I was using a hypnosis technique to have him visit kind of the astral plane and such, and together interested in Celtic mythology and magic and the pantheon and such. So I thought he would be visiting one of the Celtic beings, but instead turned out to be this angel. And we had no idea that they told us its name, and I wasn't familiar with the name, and I had to do some research to find it later. But we were supposed to be working together, and that we had a lot of work to do together, and this and that. And it began as an adventure, as a journey together of basically taking him through the kind of magical techniques and experience that I did by myself. But I shared it with him, and he just became an amazing seer, and being able to work together and record the results and what was said and what was experienced. That's the whole second book. And the most amazing magical experiences that I had, and we both shared or included in that second book, and has really been a progressive journey of magic, because it started with my personal experiences within this art, and then sharing it with him, and then it exploding, and then doing work for clients later, and making talismans and doing things. It's just been it really has been a journey with a beginning and evolving ever since. So the books really do go in order that way. But the second book is definitely more, I'd say, fascinating because it focuses on the results and experiences of me and my scryer.
Because what I actually personally like about Gateways Through Lights and Shadow is you couldn't bullshit this. In other words, this is a work of a guy who actually did the work. And one complaint that Wade and I had on the show is a lot of people, they'll fill up this whole book with like that much of crap and only that much of actual practical stuff. While this one, it's like upon opening it, it's like, damn, as in, okay, this is a handbook. And I highly recommend this for those people who really want to take their ceremonial magic to the next level. But it'll also bring me to ask, do you have something planned after this? Is there another book coming that you might be wanting to share about to the people?
I do, and people have been asking, and I've honestly felt bad for it. It's like I should have had a few out by now, but I've been so absorbed into doing work for people and for clients, in between all the other things that I do, that sitting down to just write has been extremely challenging for several years now.
True.
And I'm really hoping to get back to it, but I have a lot of data and a lot of framework for several books. One of them that I'm be my next one is the story and the shared experience of my house spirit Hiram, who's included in.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, and Gateway Shadow, and the whole history as he's told it from when he was in physical human being and such, to the whole process. He's got quite a history that he's told to me, and it's fascinating. It reads like a novel, sometimes like a fantasy novel, but I was like, this needs to be shared. And there's just a lot of wisdom and a lot of things that he said to me and to my wife and family, even a couple of my students. And there's just been a lot of knowledge I've asked him. He's my teacher and magical advisor since I've had him, and recording those and sharing those in the book, the ones that I think that would be useful for the wider occult audience, is something that I want to put forth and I think would be valuable. It's just really getting it together, and it's something that I really want to do. But I've had a lot of experience working in the Lemegita now, evoking the spirits and being able to see and speak with them, clearly. And they've done work for clients, and I have a lot of data. It's just sharing the can that are okay to share, that doesn't share the personal requests and questions and results from the clients. I keep those private,
of course,
for the clients. Yeah, trying to get that, and eventually might have something compiled, because there's been a few books on Gozetia and respected ones, like from one of my fellow magicians and mentor, like John King, and I didn't want to do something redundant, but possibly put something forward from that. And I'm working from the third Gozetia now and doing experiments with that, and it's just a lot of ongoing work and to write. It's just taking some time, but hopefully I'll have some more works out in the future.
The next question I wanted to ask you is, I'm familiar with the story of your familiar spirit, the one you were sharing about. That was the one, if I'm not mistaken, because it's kind of getting older, my memory is not what it used to be, that when you wanted to move houses, it wasn't too cooperative. Am I correct? And you had to kind of like convince it to move with you. Am I correct with that?
No, it was actually what happened is that it said it would prove its worth to me, and it told me to sell my house and to move. And I was like, we were in a bad place financially. Didn't seem at a place that we would be able to move and everything. And he's like, you really need to trust me, and you need to do it now. Now's the timing to move. And if you do this, you're going to be able to get a much bigger place and a magical working room that's going to suit your further experiments and such. And so it was really a leap of faith, going, okay, I have this familiar spirit, but I was like, I decided to do it. And I mean, our house sold within like a week or two. I mean, it was that quick, and several thousand over the asking price. And when we got the new house, it was like 3 times the size of the one I was at. And the room is my magical working room in the basement that has like a secret entrance now, and it's amazing. I mean, everything that he said and instructed has proven to be beyond useful, incredible, and completely accurate, to the point that if we have any kind of issue at all and stuff, my wife is there, ask Hiram to just see what he says, and we go to him for
That's amazing.
for everything. My only difficult
Yeah,
point
go ahead.
my only difficult point was when we were moving. I became so connected with him and everything. I did a ritual to kind of, he had to be in storage, his vessel, the human skull that I have him in, and able to talk to him as well. And that in between point was tough for me until I finally got everything in the new house and got him unpacked and everything to restore that kind of communication. But yeah, it's been incredible.
It kind of reminds me of Bob the Spirit from the Harry Dresden books. It's a very similar thing, which made me want to ask, do you offer a course, or are you planning to write about your process of how the exact procedure of how you built that communication with that spirit and recruited it? Is this something that you offer as training, or is it even in one of your books? Could I have missed it? I mean, is there anywhere we could learn about this?
The process is enlightened. How I did it, and the process of bringing Hiram into the skull. It was a few different magical methods that we used. I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure it out. A lot of it was speaking to a magical associate who's really well versed in ancient Israel, Hebraic folk magic, and the Olv and the spirit in the skull that way, and whatever records there were, which there's scant things, and filling in the lines in between. And then it was a joint effort of my scryer and I, basically going in spirit vision, using a lot of the techniques that Josephine McCarthy talks about, going into a place of the abyss to find Hiram, and so we used a lot of magical methods, combined technologies, but overall, like, I think with a lot of the results and successes with the book, it was really on the side of the spirits and everything, because I wasn't going to force a spirit into a skull. I didn't want something that would be potentially
dangerous,
not happy with me. I wasn't going to keep it in my house. I wanted it to be completely willing to be there and to do what I needed it to do. And even so, I was skeptical of the identity and what the spirit claimed to be. I even checked with other angels saying, is this legit? And I got affirmation, yes, it's legit. You need to do this now. And so I wouldn't consider, I've only done it the one time. And I just consider myself very, other people have even asked, like, oh, can you put a spirit in a vessel and send it to me? I'll pay for it. I'm like, no, I can't give you a spirit. Can you even see and hear it? Even if I did.
But do you have intentions though of like systematizing that into just one book on how you did it from like beginning to end, or is that something that you're going to take to the grave?
I think the details, I'm share some more details, but I think the reader, if they're interested, will be able to get an idea of exactly how I did it, from Light and Shadow. I mean, I included the main points in there of how I did, and I think there's some other work historically. I think for Akar, some other notes about how people used to bring spirits in the skulls. I don't think there's just a one set way, but if people are really interested, they'd probably reach out to me if they had any like questions of filling in the gaps. But again, it's one of those things that I think I brought together, and it clicked and it worked, and I was very fortunate. But I don't know if I could claim that I have a repeatable, reliable system that's going to work for everybody. That would be nice, but it was yeah, it was just kind of a culmination of some things that really came together and worked for me.
It's amazing.
Yes,
Anyway, yeah, Frater. I mean, that's it's interesting to hear all these stories about you because, like I said, you've always been a gold standard even since the Occult Forum days. And I mean, I hope one of these days maybe you can offer like a workshop to say, all right, guys, you know what, this is how I did it. Just pay attention. And like with the way you write, if like what I like about how you write, it's almost as clear as how you talk. One of the other authors that I viewed in the show, Marco Visconti, is the same. That he speaks normally and then he writes normally, and it makes sense. You know what I mean? In other words, he's not obfuscating his messages. So seeing a workshop on that would be very amazing. So maybe you might want to consider like, all right, just pick my brain. This is how I did it. Sign up and learn, because I know you have your Lemegeddon workshop. So this brings us to the next segment of the show, which is the current event segment, basically to John Stewart. As a practitioner who takes his practice really seriously, how do you see occultism nowadays, post-pandemic? Is it on the rise? Are there going to be a new line of Jedi Knights like Frater Ashen Chassan? Or are we slowly turning into a bunch of misfits because of TikTok? What's your take on the occult as a whole?
My take on it is that, especially with technology, you're going to have your blessings and curses that go with it. You know, for every action, so on and so forth. You know, you always get the counter to that. I must say that in the positive light, you know, these days it is amazing. We have some excellent magicians and scholars have come to the field and are now communicating and interacting. So the discovery of manuscripts and translating those manuscripts and the technologies and piecing together grimoires and pieces that have been obscure or lost for, you know, decades, if not you know, centuries before together now. And it's neat. It's amazing to see, and, you know, new published work and collaborative efforts from very excellent scholars and magicians is something that is gold for people who are in this field and interested in this type of material. And it's, you know, it's really fortunate to see some of the people that that I have connections with, I have friendships with, and that they share their discoveries with me. You know, look what was found in, you know, in this area, and that it's evolving very, very quickly all the time, and new discoveries are being made all the time, new translations, and to see I guess the revival of you know, this magical technology, and that it being considered and reworked and practiced by serious and talented magicians is excellent to see.
The information is so easy to come by nowadays. Like back in our day, Occult Forum, you got to go to the bookstore, hope the book is there, track it down. Now it's like Amazon, click here. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? It's like they got it easy, right? Compared to our time, occult was still occult. You get what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah, it's so much different. And it is wonderful. I think it's a very good thing. The downside of what I see from some Facebook groups, other people, is that you have basically a community, a loose community in some ways, where everybody has a voice and everybody has an opinion, which can be, you know, okay, but you have a lot of misinformation or just simply things that are going on that are considering maybe not the most mentally and emotionally healthy, you know, viewpoints for people. And for you have new people coming to the esoteric and occult all the time, and I think they're getting wrong ideas about, one, what it's about, two, what historical magic was used for and about, and, you know, several points of they get these kind of you know, fallacy ideas about either what they can do, what the spirits are about, and, you know, how magic works.
They have a fast forward approach to anything. Like they don't want to earn their stripes. You know, that's why I'm sure as a martial artist, you know, that you could get a black belt overnight, but that black belt's worth nothing. It's the amount of time you spend on the mats that gives you that skill. And some people say, no, I want to summon demons now. It's like, dude, you know what I mean? You got to earn that stripe. So the quickness of information nowadays in this industry, everybody wants it now, but people like you and me and Wade, we earned our stuff. We spent nights and months and years in the book studying, researching, and trial, error, frustration, success. So our stripes are earned, and that's one thing I'd like to see would come back to the new generation. Do you think they'll ever get to your level where they're taking it as seriously as you are, or do you think that they're going to continue to want faster results?
I think the majority of the community, you get people, and it's kind of a sign of the times where it's going to be, they're looking for something immediate. Immediate gratification is definitely rife within most of our culture. But regardless of the generations that pass, I do think there's going to be select individuals who are meant to do this kind of work, and they're the ones that are going to spend the time and really spend the energy and the focus to really get a hand of things. But it'll be rare. It's rare now, and I think is definitely rare before. So in a way, I think it'll kind of maintain for at least the deeper parts of this art and what it's about will be reserved for the people who it's meant for.
Very true.
The people to do this kind of work, and it's not for everybody. And I'm very much an advocate that regardless of the wants and desires, if they can understand it even separately from their will, it's not for everybody. It was never meant to be for everybody. And even some people who might find themselves dedicated have the capacities, even if they're developed capacities, to be able to make this stuff work, to be able to see and communicate with these beings, and to have the faculties necessary to, I think, formulate constructive communication and exchange, because there's so many within our own psyche and fallibility as this human being, mentally and psychology, where things can go awry, where distractions can come up, or idiotic actions taken. there's so many things, and it takes a certain kind of individual, I think, to approach these arts in a very most productive ways, not only for themselves, but I think if they're doing the work of the classical magician, to do it for the communities as well, do it for others. I do believe that magic has been used for and is used to not just better our own lives, but better those around us. And there's compensation for that. It's a profession for sure, but I think it takes a certain kind of personality.
That's amazing. And, with that being said, you see, like I said, you seem very scholarly in your approach. Now, I'm just kind of curious, since you shared with your current events, have there been any texts or works, books or systems that you've experimented or used that you'd say, don't touch it, it's dangerous? As in, because like, if it's one person I'd like to ask about this, would be you. It's like, where would you tell me, like, Robert, don't even bother with that, that's too dangerous, or I had a bad experience with that, I'd recommend against it? Because I'd love to get your opinion, because I've heard differing things from different people. You, as a solid practitioner, a proven practitioner, have you ever had anything like that?
Well, I can say there's some systems, and there's definitely some spiritual beings that I definitely will not work with. I won't evoke. I'm not interested in, and because I don't think they would be helpful or truly productive in my personal life, or those of even potential clients. I just don't see it as a good idea. And there's definitely some magical books. I would say a lot more modern ones that I think are not very, very useful and could be harmful. They get a lot of and speaking from the late and very respected Jake Stratton Kent and stuff, they try to touch on the ooky spooky thing. It's a very popular, like, how dark and how forbidden magic then we go, because that really appeals especially to the younger magician crowd. It's it's a textbook kind of psychological prompt and stuff that they're drawn for. It's a lot of people, I guess, unfortunately drawn to magic come from the kind of rebellious or dark thing, because that's, I don't know, it makes them feel powerful or whatever. But there's a lot there that it's going to cause if nothing else, just on a psychological level. Mm-hmm. Even if we're not talking about the spirits and the beings involved themselves and stuff, it can be destructive. But even for some of these beings, I'm not really an advocate of, like, nobody should touch or read this or go that way. That's not what I'm about. I mean, I'll be honest, when I think, a client asked me, they're like, what do you think about this? Will this be useful? I'm like, personally, this is how I perceive it. And, it depends on what you're really wanting. And I don't pretend to have the answers for everybody. People are different, even some spirits and some angels, ones that are not useful or beneficial to me, they may be for somebody else. Their path is different. And I don't think everybody needs to be doing the same thing. That's not what I'm about, magically or otherwise. I just know what has worked for me so far and what my discretion will tell me, but I really don't in a place where I really feel like speaking out or telling people how to do their magic. I do the magic the way that I do for me and for others.
That's very respectable. Because like as a person who does magical services professionally, I also do this as well here in the Philippines. You'd be surprised sometimes the requests that people get. I mean, it's kind of like, are you serious? Like, I've had people message me saying, I want to summon Lucifer and I want to invoke him into me. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. It's like, no. But in your case, I just wanted to ask, like, do you have certain policies as a practicing and a professional magician? Like, I won't do curses, or I won't do this. I mean, what's the standard that you follow as a professional magician? Huh?
Yeah, as a professional magician, I will not curse or bind people. I will not bind spirits on the behalf of other people. And I've had a lot of people come to me, why won't you do this? I do this. And, they try to argue. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this for you. I'm definitely, my power is to bend another's will. I've gotten countless, can you make this girl my sex slave? And I want her to be obsessed with me. A lot of love and obsession spells. And classically, other magicians did that. I totally wear in the PGM. There's a lot of ancient, like very, very intense magical spells that I won't touch. I just refuse that because I don't feel like having myself involved, you can say karmatically, energetically, or otherwise. I just do not care to become involved in that. My own interaction and communications with, especially with the angelic beings, I've learned enough where, at least for me personally, that's not a good idea. I want to put that on my plate, and I don't want to have any kind of connected strands of those energy workings involved in my own life. So I won't do curses or bindings, love bindings for clients, on their behalf. There's some things I just refuse to do for my own practice. And I guess it can be my own personal moral code or whatever that people try to argue. But I'm not as free willy-nilly and such with my services. There's plenty of people that will offer them, tell them.
Well, judging by the fact that you're so into martial arts, you have a very strong code of honor, and I'm sure the community really needs people like that. Because, like, imagine a guy with your abilities and your knowledge just blasting every person who cut him off in traffic. I mean, that caused chaos. So, as Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility, and I personally thank you for that. It's very admirable. Okay, so Frater, we're going now to the last part of the show.
I do the best I can.
Huh? What was that?
I said I do the best I can.
Thank you for that. Good example of a very honorable mage. So anyhow, we're going to go to the last part of our show now, the Occultex, and I'm excited. I'm really excited, actually, to hear something from you. Occultex is where you, the guest, teach us anything you'd like, anything about you, anything that we could personally apply in our daily lives. It could be as complex, as simple as possible. Frater, what do you got for us today?
Well, I was thinking about there's so many techniques and such that I like to do that I use on a regular basis. I actually do have an online class of various magical I use without any real tools or other things. It's in the skills of the ceremonial magician class that I teach. But for the listeners, if they're interested and it's not like a big secret, but it's not as readily known, surprisingly, or it's not talked about as much, but often to me about consecration, the making an object magical in use for magic. And back in the day, there was, I say, the kind of new age day, they always talked about charging. They kind of had an idea about, well, first, run it underwater and stuff, and then you can charge it magically. I remember reading, I don't know how many new age books about that, but the act of consecration, and very much within a liturgical setting, is the technology of what is used in Solomonic magic, is that it's a step of process where you begin with exorcism. You exorcise an object to remove any attachments energetically or spiritually or what have you, to make sure that the material that you're working with is purified, that it doesn't have any negative things attached to it. So the exorcism is simply done by prayer of exorcism, and then it comes with a combination of exorcism and consecration through the elements. And through the elements, traditionally, you have the earth and water, which is consecrated salt and water. And when put together in its components, you make holy water. And there's blessings and consecrations for those elements of the salt and the water. You put those together. So sprinkling it with holy water, and there's a lot of traditional prayers and prayers such as in the Key of Solomon you can use. They're not hard to find. And then it is further purified and consecrated through incense, and which is the element of air. And then finally, fire a lot of times is seen as the chrism, or the holy anointing oil. And this is probably most aspected within like the book of Abramelin, when it's used on the ritual items and like the almond wand perchance. So you've got an exorcism and a consecration of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, with these prayers imbued with the proper spirit. This is how you make an item magically consecrated for use in magical operations only. So you take a bare substance and everything, and you purify, to get rid of the nasty stuff that may be associated, and then you're blessing it through those elements, through the use of words and actions and gestures. So I go into more details in my class. There's a combination of things that can be used, even gestures, being able to really hold a focus and manifestation. But I've the consecration process, because it's not something that's just linked to Western religious and spiritual and magical traditions, but ones in the East as well. It's really neat to see even traditional Reiki has its way of cutting the cords off negative things, and then charging things, literally consecrating it positively, and then using various mudras and mantras to do the same. And I've enjoyed experimenting using both of those. So that's something that people, especially if they're new to magic or ceremonial magic, and it's a question I get a lot, is how do I consecrate this? I've made this tool. How do I make it suitable for magic?
Wow, I that's everything I expected to hear from you and more. Thank you so much. Now, I do have one question. Can you consecrate goetic seals the same way, or do you recommend a different approach? Like, example, if I had a seal made to the spirit Furcas, okay, just had it engraved on lead, can we consecrate it using your method, or would you recommend a different method for that?
No, I would recommend the same. So the interesting things about the lamens, the spirit lamens, is that, yeah, you definitely want it purified and consecrated ahead of time. So you start out with a piece of lead, and you either you melt it down, or you can make it out of the plate and everything. But before I engrave it or do anything else, I'm going to exercise the lead and everything. I'm going to take it through that purification process, and make sure that it's suitable. And then if I want to find a proper time, Saturday, or if Saturn and everything, since we're going through that aspect and stuff, would be a great time to engrave the actual sigil and such, and put that on there. Because remember, if we're talking about it traditionally, the pentagram of Solomon is on the reverse side, and that's a very much holy symbol, a holy sign. And the sigil itself, regardless of how they're appreciated as a demon, as a spirit, it's something that you plan to converse with and talk to. And even if you're doing traditional Solomonic magic where there is an exorcism, a binding by oath and such, it can sound severe. It's done in a respectful and diplomatic method. It's not done to insult or criticize or make them angry. It's done in a very professional, albeit kind of a imperialistic way sometimes, but it's a sacred metal with their seal on it. It's meant to represent them. So that is consecrated and kept as a holy magical item with their seal on it, used specifically for that purpose of contacting them.
And knowing that you have your wonderful shop, Frater Ashen Chassan's Magical Implements, are the seals there already consecrated, or do we need to consecrate them ourselves? Because that's one thing that's raising in popularity in this day and age. Like, example, Goetic Impressions makes these really beautiful Goetic medallions. But you can either pay them to have it consecrated, or you can consecrate it yourself. But you're not the one making it, so it's already pre-prepared for you. So could you also consecrate a pre-made one, or is it like, no, if you're not going to consecrate it and exercise at the beginning, you might as well not do it at all?
I like to do it step by step. That's the way I sell my things. There's people that have better machinery and aspects they can make. I used to do everything by hand with a hand engraver, and now I've got machines that make more precise things, but I still use my day and hour and exorcism and consecrating methods. For me, I'm not, for the talismans and the pentacles of the Key of Solomon, I'm not making jewelry. I'm making talismans, and their use and worth is only as well as their function and results. So that's my claim. And when I started this, I saw them working for me, and then some people asked, and I said, you know what, I'm only going to do this if they work. And that was several years ago, and I've had most of my customers are repeat customers, and they're like, this, as soon as I got this happened, and I've got records and records and records of the results of the clients receiving these. So I'm like, okay,
amazing, I'm
going to continue to do, because I think they look, I'm proud of the work that I do, but more so I'm very much happy with the results that they achieve, because talismans, pinnacles, they're not jewelry. They're supposed to be functioning magical implements. So people say, oh, is this going to be consecrated, or do I need to do it myself? Yes, they're consecrated. I sell magical items, not jewelry. And that's what I continue to do.
All right, so for those of you who want to check out Frater Ashen Chassan's page, he's got facebook.com/people/Frater Ashen Chassan's Magical Implements, or just search it up, Frater Ashen Chassan's Magical Implements. I am very impressed by the stuff he's making. Maybe one day he's going to sell a duplicate of that lovely sword and belt of his that I've been ogling over for the past 10 years. If you do, I'll definitely get you one. But once again, Frater, thank you so much for being part of this show, being part of the magick.tv history. We've learned a lot. Consecration, it's never been talked about. I learned that from you, directly from you. I'm so honored, and I'd love to have you again in the future when we talk about other topics, and especially if you're going to be talking about more books. So for the meantime, I'm going to put you in the waiting room, but please don't leave just yet. All right, so once again, this is the season ender. This is not the season ender. Next May 11, we're going to be ending the season with a special someone. Frater Ashen Chassan, thank you so much for this really amazing episode. Stay tuned to see who our season ending special is going to be.